Hi, I'm Alex.
My name is Sergey. We talk about table tennis.
We are Table Tennis 11. Today we continue our discussion about multiball. This probably would be the last part.
Yeah, probably, but who knows? You said that multiple training is limitless in its variativity, or how do you call it in English? So the possibilities are limitless. So maybe we come to one topic more, but right now we plan that it will be the last discussion. I think we discussed how we can use the multiball or how we perform the multiball training, but maybe we could discuss what should be the part of multiball training in overall training of the table tennis player.
It also depends on different circumstances, such as your training abilities, what kind of group you have, do you have enough sparring partners, etc. So theoretically, I would say one training session could be only multiball, maybe with the exception of warming up. Or you can do half of the training using multiball method, or maybe 10 minutes. Sometimes, even if you are not planning to use multiball during the session, you can make a decision to use multiball in a certain moment if it's needed. So in principle, it's also absolutely unlimited. You can make 10 balls during the whole training session, or you can make full training session with multiball.
I don't remember if we discussed this question before, but very often the partners are limited today, and sometimes you have a partner who never did multiball. Is it easy for the person who never did multiball training before to start feeding the player? Do you think a lot of education needed, or after 1, 2, 3 sessions it will be good enough to use him?
It depends, of course. First of all, how skilled is the person who will feed the ball. For a stronger player, for sure it would be more easier. Maybe for amateur player it takes more time. But everything is possible. I would say that feeding multiball is not a great science. So you don't need to train 10 years in a row to become a multiball expert. From my point of view, 1 month experience is sufficient. If you know at least how to play table tennis, you start doing multiball, in 1 month you can make good training for your student.
When we were discussing now that part of the training could be multiball, one half or complete and so on, it doesn't matter how many training sessions a week you have. Top players or good players, they train often twice a day. And for some average player, maybe they can take 3 trainings a week. So does it influence the multiball choice?
Oh, of course it does. Of course it does. Let's take as an example professional players who trains 10, 11 times per week. My experience when I visited Chinese training center, during the second training session, they make multiball approximately half of the time.
So the first was without multiball?
Yes, they start warming up. Then they make 1 or 2 exercises. After that, they make service training for, 5 minutes. And then they start with multiball. Usually group of 3 players, they play together. One is feeding, one is doing exercise, one is collecting balls. And normally one set is 150 balls approximately, maybe sometimes more, sometimes less. I would say most time more than less. But we can count 150 balls. And they make from 6 up to 10 sets each.
And how many tables were there? So how many players were doing the practice?
It was a huge hall. And there were 2 groups, girls and boys. If I remember correctly, it was half of the tables were free So the hall was really huge, and there was a group of 18 to 20 players. With each group, there were several coaches, at least 4 with each group.
So coach could give some attention to the players when they were performing the multi-ball training to make some corrections and comments.
Yes, exactly. But also sometimes some of the coaches are feeding balls by themselves. Then they take 2 players. One is playing, second is collecting balls, but at the same time also have a rest.
Do they make comments? Do you feel that they work actively when they feed the balls? Because sometimes I see the coach just feeds 120 the balls without stop, and then they take it next and so on. So
with such a level of players, there were quite a few comments during the whole training. But of course, sometimes coach put emphasis on this or that mistake, or he advised how to do it better. But from my point of view, the weaker player you have, the more you have to talk to him or to her.
But I remember you also mentioned the players were selecting or making up exercises for themselves. So everybody was doing different exercise usually.
Yes, sometimes. But Chinese way of training, they have very few exercises. So they repeat them one after another. In Europe, for instance, or in other countries of the world, they have more variation in the training. So Chinese, they make very simple. Half of the table forehand, half of the table backhand, first attack against underspin, and then half of the table. Or sometimes right half and left half, different combinations, but it's actually very simple.
Do you mean for multi-ball training, the selection of exercises was also not that big? So they were very limited?
Yes. For instance, player feels that he needs more confidence in receiving service or in short game, then he asks that the first ball is short. And also usually they combine this with footwork, because mainly it's a question of keeping pace of the exercise and perform a good footwork. So these are basic things that could be trained with multi-ball most effectively.
We were also discussing in previous videos that multi-ball training could serve different purposes, like improving footwork technique, and then physical exercises that you train your physical condition. Then you can train technique of the stroke, like backhand stroke, short game and flick. How would you make it systematically in your training? How would you plan your training process to do it correctly? So would you mix everything together? For example, you do one exercise for footwork, then next for physical condition, and then one more for short game, and you put as much as possible in one practice, or you separate, you devote training to footwork, and another you devote to technique and so on.
Yes, the second option. I see no reason to mix different direction of training in one training session. So if you train speed, or if you train footwork, if you train technique, it should be separate training. In my training process, I usually plan on a weekly basis. Monday, the main aim is to restore technique and to work on the technique. So Monday, I usually use lower pace and more simple exercises. Depending on your short-term plan, Tuesday or Wednesday should be dedicated to the footwork. And during this day, players sweat a lot. It's a great amount of work. All players don't like this training. After that, next training should be more relaxed. Maybe you again turn to technique, and then you can work on endurance, on power.
So in this case, the training will be more efficient. So if you would combine three, so you think it will be less productive in all three, or why do you think it will not work?
Yeah, I believe so. So in principle, it's the same. If you need to pass several exams in the university or at school, you can work 1 minute on mathematics, 1 minute on literature, 1 minute on biological science. Then you are simply wasting your time. You cannot switch so quickly. And your brain, and in the case of table tennis, also your muscle, your body cannot switch and work on different end goals during the short period of time. I believe that more effective is to make longer training on one end goal.
Yeah, I agree with you. From my experience, even for professional players, you should not hurry. I mean, so when I watched Chinese top players practicing when I was at the World Championships, so they are never in a hurry. European players, they often would like to make as much exercises as possible. Chinese players, they are very selective in the training process. So I think even if you have 2 hours, it looks like it's a lot of time. But in reality, if you have a break and then you put balls in the box and so on, then you don't have so much time left to practice many different exercises. Maybe you can just make one set for each exercise, and it will not be efficient, as you said.
And also the volume of training. If you compare Europe and China, in Europe, players are usually playing less. So the training time is less than comparing to China. For instance, twice a day, 1.5 hours, it's more than they can do. But in China, they have 3 training sessions, sometimes 2. And this is each of the session is more than 2 hours. But the intensity of the training in Europe is much higher than in China. They take short breaks between the balls after set of the balls which were played. So 2 or 3 balls, they make one short break for 20 or 30 seconds. So they are not in a hurry. They, in this case, the training is also well balanced.
Yeah, so you need concentration. Yeah, so then
concentration. Also, it's very important to make a good training. It's very important to do enough job. But at the same time, it's also very important to have enough rest between training, between balls, because if you are trying to hurry all the time, your training is not so effective. Again, we can take the example of studying. If you study very hard, 1 hour, 2 hours in a row, then your brains are simply overheated. So you need to make a short break for 5 minutes. You can make a cup of tea or a cup of coffee according with your own preference. But you need some short breaks during the training session also. Also, your training should be balanced and you should be not in a hurry. Of course, if you have enough time in the whole. Being a professional player, you trained a lot during your youth time. Can you tell me your own feeling about this intensity of the training and about the breaks, about the rest?
I have a feeling, so maybe it was my mistake in the youth age. Maybe I could play even better than I played that time. That it was, in my case, a desire to work for 100% intensity all the time. In my time, it was Soviet Union, and coaches were not talking a lot to the players. So you have to decide by yourself how intensive you should work or not work. And then I think, just from my experience, it was very little discussion with the players. What you talked earlier about how much multi-ball training should be, which exercises to work, it is always good when it is discussed or explained to the player, so he would also understand what he is doing. So if the player is playing like a machine, just fulfilling or tries to fulfill what you tell him, then it will be not effective. So I think the player should have a feeling that he is doing the right job, and this is what was missing in my time. So it was a lot of training, so it was possibility to train 6-7 hours a day, but it was too little thinking or what should be trained and how it should be. And it was not possible to choose like that you would like to choose. So everybody were doing the same exercise, the same time, and then the same. And then when all players are equally treated, and then it can't be like this, because especially on the top level, some players are in a good physical shape, some are after sickness and so on. And then if the player was really sick and you try to put a lot of load for him, you can just destroy his health. And then in my time, nobody was thinking about this.
And so individual approach is also very important.
Yeah, so I think this is the key, individual approach and explaining to the player what is correct. I think the player should agree. So if he doesn't agree, it will be bad. And if he doesn't understand what he is doing, it also will be less efficient.
And of course, we need to say that if we are talking about half of the training session was multi-ball, and 150 balls each set. And we were mentioning 6 up to 10 sets during the training. We are talking about professional high-class players. First of all, the coach have to see if the player is ready. Also, if you make a multi-ball session for the first time, then your player simply is not ready for this intensivity.
Yeah, so this is what you say, because when I was 17, they just started with multi-ball. So before, when I was 15, 16, nobody used. So we had 10 balls, so it was not one ball, it was training with many balls. So this was multi-ball training. But then it came, and then I remember it was Vladimir Shubin who was coaching later, giving multi-balls to Vladimir Samsonov in Spain. This is just what I know. And then the intensity was so high that I was feeling so badly. So I nearly to vomit. So I think also if you try to use multi-ball training for improving physical condition, you should do also physical conditions. Maybe run 5-10 kilometers in the morning and so on. You just can't start like from zero to high intensity. So it will be not good for technique, not good for health, for nothing. So I think this gradual like improvement or practice should be the goal. So you can't put the goal that within 1 month I improve with multi-ball. Of course you can improve something, but you can be too intensive. It will be counterproductive.
I remember in the university, we both graduated from sport universities. So the main principle of physical training was from easy to difficult and from simple to complicated. And also you don't need to make this progress very fast. So first you need to make a basis, and on this basis you can develop further with the technique, with the amount of work, with the training of different skills. What are your personal favorite multi-ball exercises?
I didn't make so much multi-ball exercises recently or in my life altogether. But I especially like exercises which are involving shot game. I have problem in my shot game, and I think I feel improvement in technique and in footwork when I train exercises with the shot game.
So of course it's a combination of short and long.
Yes, yeah. So this is just, I find it is very important in table tennis to move from the table and to the table. So this is more difficult than to move along the table.
What about backspin balls?
Yes, backspin balls, it is very efficient because usually when you practice it without multi-balls, you can't make so many tries as you want. Here you 10, 20, 50 or 100 in a row, so you can try different angle of the racket and different spin and the placement of the ball without watching on the player. I think here you can also allow yourself. So sometimes you need to practice just to be precise. So you make 100 topspin against backspin and you would like to put 99 on the table. And sometimes you have the possibility to try before you practice the precise game. So I
also
think
you can increase a little bit or decrease during the process. You see the result immediately.
Yes. And then you can ask to give backspin half long, very long, and so on. Then this is and with different spin, because very often the ball with the backspin has very little spin, and then you made mistakes. So and then if the person who serves you the ball can make these changes to give with more spin, with less spin, and then you can also practice this. I think the variation of spin is very important in table tennis, because top players they use this a lot.
For me, also, it seems that sometimes multi-ball training is training for physical conditions, not only for table tennis. So there are two kinds of physical preparation in different kind of sports. Is general physical preparation when you run, when you go to the gym, when you make push-ups or other exercises. But there is also a big part and very important part of the special preparation when you work on particular skills which are important for table tennis. In other words, special physical preparation should be 100% adjusted to the table tennis game. So if you are running fast, you are working on your speed. But if you are moving near the table, you keep the same position as if you are in the game. And then muscles are involved the same way as in the game. It's very important to make special physical preparation related to table tennis. So in general, we can recommend multi-ball training to all kind of players and all kind of coaches. Doesn't matter if you have players of high level or the highest level or even top level or newcomers, rookie players.
Multi-ball training, it is very effective tool indeed, but it should be also handled with care, because if you don't have enough experience or you make too much without preparation, then you can destroy your technique and you can also damage your physical conditions. So it should be handled with care.
Thank you for watching us. We hope it was interesting and we are waiting for your feedback.
We will be glad to hear your ideas about educational videos we are doing, and please let us know what might be interesting for you, and we will try to discuss these topics in the future.